Welcome to ETF Explained, a series on the Get Started Investing podcast. In each episode, we unpack one ETF to help you build the skills to analyze ETFs in your portfolio. My name's Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Very excited for this episode. Always love building the skills to analyze any ETF. And Today we are talking about an ETF that certainly gets a lot of attention. Full disclosure, I own it in my superannuation.
Super.
Yeah. It is the VanEck Morningstar Wide Moat ETF.
Yes. The
ticker Moat. M-O-A-T.
So in today's episode, as always, we're going to look at what we can pull out of the name and what information we can learn there. We'll look at the purpose, the benchmark, fees, and then close out with some of the top holdings in this ETF, because Ren, this one is slightly different to a lot of the other ETFs that we've been doing in past.
It's issued by VanEck.
It is issued by VanEck. Well, let's start with that. Let's start with the name and what we can pull out of it. The VanEck Morningstar Wide Moat ETF.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, VanEck, and we haven't looked at a lot of VanEck ETFs. They're probably I don't want to say second tier because I don't want to impugn their quality, but they're smaller. They're a smaller, more niche ETF provider in Australia. Yeah.
Yes.
So VanEck are the product issuer, but then we see Morningstar next. Now, for people who are unfamiliar, Morningstar is they do a lot of market and company data. They do analysis on companies. They give ratings around valuations.
Investment research, really.
Yeah, investment research, yeah. Perfect. That was a lot more succinct than what I said. And so Morningstar, it's the Morningstar Wide Moat ETF. Now, people who are familiar with Morningstar might know that that is one of the ratings Morningstar will give a company, how wide their moat is. Wide, narrow, no moat at all. And that is the foundation of this ETF. VanEck have built an ETF around the companies that Morningstar rate as having a wide moat.
Yes.
Now, Bryce, before we even get to the ETF itself, we need to bust this jargon. What are we talking about when we talk about a moat?
Ren, a moat is the ability for a company to use its competitive advantage to have pricing power, to beat its competitors.
Yeah, and for that competitive advantage to be sustainable over time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Long period of time.
Classic example, Facebook Meta now has a massive competitive advantage because it has 3 billion users on the platform. Hard for another social media company to come and disrupt that network.
Yes, absolutely.
Another classic example, Apple, Nike, brand competitive advantages. Hard for another competitor to come and take their market share.
Yes.
I can keep going.
No. We'll get to some of the companies later. So that is a bit of jargon for the name, Moat. As always, though, we use the website for the single source of truth, the VanEck website, where all the information that we're going to go through today is available. That's the first skill with analyzing ETFs. Head to the issuer website, where you will find the purpose for this ETF, which is to give investors exposure to a diversified portfolio of attractively priced US companies with sustainable competitive advantages, according to Morningstar's equity research team.
So that is similar to what we just said. And as we explained, the moat is the key thing there. And that is all about sustainable competitive advantages. Now, what does the ETF actually track? Does it track an index? The answer to that is yes, as we can see from the website. It's the Morningstar Wide Moat Focus NRAUD Index. Now, a few acronyms there, NR and AUD. What do we mean?
So, Ren, we'll start with NR. NR means net return, and that means because all the companies within the ETF are US-based, it means that the return is after the US tax has been taken out of the dividends.
Yep.
And AUD stands for Australian dollars, so it's in Aussie dollars.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
So that is the index it is tracking. Now, if you actually look under the hood at the index itself, there's a few different components that Morningstar are looking for. So first of all, at least 40 components. So it will never have less than 40 names in there. They're US based for this ETF. sustainable competitive advantages, and then finally attractively priced. So there's a few elements that the Morningstar team are looking for here. It all sounds pretty good so far, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, sounds good from the top. I've got an investment research firm picking stocks for me based on a number of core investing principles and putting them into an index.
Yeah, and it does get a bit confusing because what you've just explained, the first half of what you just explained is active management.
Yeah.
But then the second half is putting it in an index, which is passive investing.
Yes.
And so these kind of ETFs blur the lines between active and passive investing. The term you might hear, well, you will hear for these kind of ETFs is factor investing. You don't have to worry too much about what that means for the purposes of this ETF. Just know that it's not truly passive and it's not truly active. It lives in this grey area in between where there are some active decisions made, but then they're rolled into a passive investing product that's rebalanced, in this case, twice a year.
So I guess to simplify that, Morningstar set the rules, but
Yep.
then someone doesn't come in and tweak the rules based on what they're thinking and feeling.
Exactly.
And to give you an idea of what Morningstar are doing here, so they actually analyze about 1,500 companies within their universe, and from that, this ETF, as you said, Ren, they whittle it down to a number of companies that match the criteria, and from that it's at least 40. So
yeah, and to give you a sense of that 1,500, at the time of recording, 43% of the 1,500 companies have a no moat rating, 43% have a narrow moat rating, and then 14% are given a wide moat rating. So that's 14% get that tick, then a subset of that will get a attractive valuation tick, and then that will roll into the index.
yes, yeah.
So let's get back to the ETF itself. Fees. What are we paying to get access to this product?
So 0.49%. So it's not the cheapest that we've had on the show by any stretch of the imagination. It's 40 cents for every $100.
49 cents.
Sorry. That's 49 cents for every $100 that you put in. Not the cheapest that we've had on the show, but not outrageously expensive either.
And then if we turn to the performance of the ETF, it's done well. So since inception, June 2015, it's returned 15.6% per year on average, which is great.
Yeah.
It has underperformed recently, and we will get to that in a second. But over the past 12 months, over the past year, up 19.7%. Now you say, almost 20%. That feels pretty good. But how much is the US S&P 500 up in that same period?
Closer to 40%.
Yeah, 40%.
40%.
Yeah. So it's massively underperformed just the general US benchmark. And that the reasons for that will become clear when we talk about the companies in the ETF.
Yeah. I think credit where credit's due here. It's hard pressed at the moment, other than picking individual stocks, to beat 40% a year.
Yeah, but the question isn't beating 40% a year. The question is,
I know
just
that's the best.
Take the market average.
Absolutely,
take the 40%.
Absolutely. That's why we talk about it day in, day out. Now, it does pay a dividend. It pays dividends yearly. Current yield is just shy of 2%. Obviously, that does change, but this isn't one that you would be looking at if you were wanting to really boost your income.
No, we'll talk about where it fits in the portfolio at the end of this episode, but I think, I think that is clear. This is trying to invest in quality growth stocks.
Yes. And now we're at the fun part, which is actually looking at what goes inside this ETF, because this is where the magic happens. All the research that Morningstar does comes to fruition here, and you start to get a sense of actually what you're investing in. So we don't usually do industries, but probably worth touching on.
Yeah, well, I think there's some surprising things here. If I was to say the companies with the biggest sustainable competitive advantages, you would probably be thinking technology.
Tech, yeah.
But that's the third biggest sector in this ETF, about 18% of the ETF. The biggest is actually industrials, almost a quarter of the ETF, then healthcare, then technology, consumer staples, and financials round out the top five. So you get a pretty decent spread of industries.
And Ren, to clarify what industrials are there, it's companies involved in producing goods for industries such as construction and manufacturing and the like.
Yeah.
So, what are the top 10?
Yeah. Now, before we list the companies, one thing that we haven't touched on that's worth noting with this top 10 is this is an equal weighted index. So every rebalance, which for this ETF I think is twice a year, every company gets rebalanced to equal weights. And there's about 50 companies in this ETF. So every individual company gets about 2% of the index, because 2% times 50 companies equals 100%. And so when you're looking at the top holdings of an equal weighted index, you're not actually seeing the companies that Morningstar and VanEck, in this case, think have the widest moats or are the best. They all get reset at 2%, and then it's how they move since then. So the top holdings are the companies that have just had the best share market performance since the rebalance. So as we read them, that's just important to keep in mind. So Market Access Holdings is the biggest in the fund. Gilead Sciences, TransUnion, Salesforce, Autodesk, Bristol Myers Squibb, US Bancorp, Corteva, Kenvue, and Allegion. So the question is, how many of those names do you recognize?
I recognize a few, but the main takeaway is, compared to a lot of the ETFs we've been looking at, the big emission when you would expect to see US-based competitive advantaged wide moat companies, no big tech.
Yeah.
There's no big seven in there. There's no Berkshire. There's no top 10 S&P 500. Well, there might be a couple, but you're really getting exposed to different parts of the market.
Yeah, and even if they are in the ETF, because we don't know what the full 54 holdings are, if you've been underweight big tech, so the big 7 US technology companies are about a third of the S&P 500, and even if you have them in your portfolio but they're less than a third, because of how well they've done, you're going to underperform because you're just underweight. You don't own as much as the index.
Yeah.
And so earlier when we said it'll become clear why this ETF has underperformed just the general US market, that's why.
Yeah.
If you don't have as much of the big 7 tech companies, really these days, if you don't have as much of Nvidia as the S&P 500, you're going to struggle to keep up.
Yeah.
But look, some of these stocks have done really well. As we said, because it's all equal weighted, the top holdings are the ones that have done the best. Market Access Holdings in the past 6 months, up 46%. Gilead Sciences, the second biggest holdings, are up 36%. So they've had some winners in there, which is good to see. And the ETF has done well. We don't want to get that misconstrued. It just hasn't done as well as the US market.
So then the final question is, where does this ETF actually fit in a portfolio? You mentioned you have it in your superannuation fund. A lot of the Equity Mates community talk about it and want to know how it can fit in their fund or in their portfolio. So maybe let's start with you, Ren, considering you actually have it invested. How do you think about it?
Oh, I think about it as a long-term satellite investment.
Yeah.
So for me, in my super, there's like a core component that I can't touch.
Yeah.
It's just like automatic. But then I can make satellite investments around the side. And so I have like a couple of active managers in there, a couple of other stocks, individual stocks, a couple of ETFs. And this is one of the ETFs that I just think it's like, I like that it's a different strategy to what I invest in. It's like a factor investing, looking for quality. And it has a bunch of names that I don't invest in other funds or like through individual stocks. So for me, it's like, I like diversification of strategy when it comes to my super and just general investing. It's like, you're going to invest a certain way. So you want to find active managers or ETFs that will invest in other ways to you. And this for me is one.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree as well. I think if you're looking for a bit of a growth tilt away from the big index-based funds, then this is a good satellite approach. Would it be something that you could put in the core portfolio?
Oh, I would say no, but like people could definitely argue the other side of that. And I think it's completely reasonable. I just think it's like it would be something that I would want to be checking in on semi-regularly, just to make sure that the thesis around Morningstar doing a good job around analyzing moats, and then that translating to a good investment product when it's equal weighted and rebalanced every 6 months. Like, there's a couple of things you just want to check on. So yeah,
I think for me that's the biggest risk or call out, is that while everything that we've spoken about from an investment point of view and principles of investing, long-term competitive advantage and what that can mean for generating revenue and all those sorts of things, at the end of the day you are still backing Morningstar's research team over many other many other similar companies out there that offer similar products. And so to your point, like, you need to be clear on why you're backing Morningstar as the experts in that space.
Yeah.
If you've loved this episode, we'd appreciate it if you could let us know. You could leave a review through your podcast app, or simply like this video if you're watching on YouTube. We really do appreciate it. But that's it. We'll leave it there and pick it up next week.